Hi guys, today we're going to go back to learning a little bit more about lines of symmetry and how to find the vertex. Some quick reminders and announcements. Don't forget to email me if you have any questions at bmcneely@riversidehighschool.org. It's definitely not too late to turn in late work. You don't have to email me, just go ahead and do it, get it handed in, and I'll get it graded. Make sure you have out a pencil and paper right now. Be ready to take the notes and try the you try problems. That's how your brain learns. You need to be able to practice these problems in a space where you can see what you did wrong. Be sure you're logged into your school email address. If you don't know how to log into your school email address, stop now, email me, and I can help you get it figured out. There's definitely never a reason to guess, leave blanks, or write IDK in an answer blank. Email me or attend office hours to get your questions answered. Don't forget, it's really important to understand the material, so don't be like this dude on the right. Do not just make random guesses. You need to read the directions, you need to watch the video, you need to complete the assignment. You don't actually have to take a picture of the worksheet and attach it to the assignment. I will let you skip that step. All those things need to be done before you just randomly guess and submit that IP. Those random guesses get you 0 points, which do not help your grade. You can do this. Don't forget about remediation. This quarter officially ends now on May 21st. If you're happy with your grade at that point, then you're done. If you're not, you'll need to continue working for an additional week. So let's get your assignments handed in now. Don't forget, if you have a 60% or better, you'll be eligible for remediation, and most of you can hit that mark just by handing in your missing work. Bonus point project. We'll be offering you a bonus point project for the month of May. The project will be worth 20 points and will involve you choosing from a list of specific skills and creating a presentation of your choice on that skill. 20 points is about the same thing as 2 missing e-learning assignments, so it could have a big impact on your grade. We've designed this project to be possible for every student to do and should be a boost to your grade if you make an effort to meet the requirements. Projects will be due by midnight on Friday, May 22nd. The expectations and rubric for this project can be found at the top of the haiku page. Struggles or celebrations. My celebration this week is that we had a great Riley Dance Marathon. We've almost met our goal. Follow us on Instagram at RHSRDM if you want to see what we were up to last week or to make a donation. Hope to hear from you about what your struggles and celebrations are. All right, let's do some quick review. You might want to write this down in your notes. If I ask you to solve an equation or find the zeros, then you are going to do this in one of 2 ways. One way you can do it is using factoring. The other way is using the quadratic formula. Both of these have the first step. You want to write your quadratic equation in standard form, which means all your variables are on the left, your zero is on the right. It has to be equal to 0. You guys have done a really nice job on this on the IPs leading up to this point. If you're going to do factoring, then you're factoring by finding the magic numbers and grouping. If you're doing quadratic formula, you're going to be ready to just substitute straight into that quadratic formula, which is what we worked on the last 2 lessons. If you haven't done the quadratic formula or solving by factoring, you should stop here and go back and redo those lessons. You're not ready for this one yet. If you're doing factoring and it's not factorable, you can't find the magic numbers, then you will have to go over here in formula, okay? You cannot just continue factoring if you can't find 2 numbers that multiply to be one thing or add to be another. Step 3 is to use the zero product property to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve. You might have 1 or 2 solutions. Step 3 on the quadratic formula is to simplify using order of operations. You want to simplify inside your radical first, and you might have 2, 1, or no solutions. All right, so let's remind ourselves how to find the zeros if we're going to use factoring. So I want to make this equal to 0, so I'm going to start by replacing y with 0, and it's okay to have your 0 on the left. I don't need to change anything or move things around because that's going to change my signs. So right now I have that my a is 1 because there's an invisible 1 in front of the x squared, b is -2, and c is equal to -3. So I'm looking for the magic numbers, something that multiplies to be -3 and adds to be -2. So let's see, 1 and -3 multiply to be -3, and -1 and 3 multiply to be -3. But I need this to be a -2, so that second one isn't going to work. So these are my magic numbers. I rewrite this, replacing b with my magic numbers. I always like to put the -1 first because that causes me to make fewer negative errors. Notice the x squared comes down, the -3 comes down. Now I'm ready to factor by grouping. The GCF of the first group is x, so that becomes x minus 3. The GCF of the second group is 1, so that becomes x minus 3. I know I've likely done this correctly since the x minus 3's match. So the common factor of x minus 3 comes out, and then what's left is x plus 1. I have not solved, I've only factored. In order to solve, I have one more step. I rewrite these, making each factor equal to 0. Add 3 to both sides. Subtract 1 from both sides. So my zeros are, excuse me, this should have been a 3. My zeros are -1 and 3. Now, I can do the exact same thing using my quadratic formula. I still put this in standard form first. I still identify my A, my B, and my C. But in order to use the quadratic formula, that is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Well, my b is already negative. Some of you are missing this piece every time. There's a negative in the formula and a negative on the 2. Well, a negative and another negative make that become a positive. And then that's plus or minus the square root. B squared, I put that in parentheses so that I can show I'm squaring the negative, plus -4 times A times C all over 2 times A. This becomes 2 plus or minus the square root. We're simplifying inside the radical first. -2 squared becomes 4. -4 times 1 times -3 becomes +12. And 2 times 1 becomes 2. Becomes 2 plus or minus the square root of 16, all divided by 2. Then that's 2 plus or minus 4, all divided by 2. That means I'm going to split this up into 2 problems, 2 plus 4 divided by 2, and 2 minus 4 divided by 2. That's 6 divided by 2, which is 3. And -2 divided by 2, which is -1, which is exactly what I got on the previous problem. You can do this either way. The quadratic formula will always work. Factoring will only sometimes work. But based on the work involved, I prefer factoring when I can do it. All right, so what I got for my zeros were -1 and 3. So far I know this, that my line crosses the x-axis at -1 and 3. And I know that my direction is based on A. A is equal to 1. If A is positive, it's up like a cup. If A is negative, it's down like a frown. In this case, it's positive, so it should be up like a cup. The problem is there's a variety of ways that this could look. It could cut through like this. Sorry, this is really hard to draw with. It could be down here. We don't know. What we need is to find out more about our vertex, which is what we're going to work on today. So now that you can put a quadratic equation into standard form, find the zeros using factoring, identify the parts of a parabola, we're going to focus on how we calculate the line of symmetry and the vertex using the equation so that you can be ready to graph your own parabolas. So we want to remember that the line of symmetry is the same as the x value of the vertex. So I want you to write this in your notes. This is our line of symmetry, and the formula is x equals -b over 2a. You don't have to have this memorized, but you need to be able to use it. So write down in your notes, line of symmetry, x equals -b over 2a. So let's find our line of symmetry. We already know that our zeros for this are -1 and 3. We already know that it is up like a cup because A is positive. So now I can figure out the exact middle of this parabola by using my line of symmetry. X equals -b over 2 times A. So this becomes a -2 because B was -2, all over 2 times A because A was 1. A -2 becomes a +2. 2 times 1 becomes 2, and 2 divided by 2 becomes 1. So far we know that x equals 1. We know that our zeros are -1 and 3. So we're going to put those at -1 and 3. Now we know that our line of symmetry is where x equals 1. It cuts through where x equals 1. That's the middle of our parabola. But that doesn't help me much because my vertex could be here or here or here or here or here or here. I need a little bit more information. Remember, we're looking for an xy pair. Our vertex is either the maximum or the minimum point on the graph. So let's go to the next step. We now know that x equals, based on our vertex or based on our line of symmetry, we know that x equals 1. I need to know what y is equal to. Well, if I know that x equals 1, I can square it and solve. 1 squared is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, 1 minus 2 is negative 1, negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. So I should not have put that y is 1, I should have put that y equals question mark. So now I know that my vertex is 1 comma negative 4. So let's go back to our graph. We said our zeros again were negative 1 and 3 right here. That was what we found by either factoring or using the quadratic formula. We found out that our line of symmetry was x equals 1. Means that's the middle of our parabola right there. I found that using that x equals negative b over 2a. The vertex I found was negative 1 and 4. I found that by substituting 1 back into the equation. And the direction when I'm done graphing these things should be up like a cup because a is positive. Well, my vertex should fall right on my line of symmetry, which means my curve looks something like this. And remember, you don't want it to make it a V shape. It should be more of a U shape. So notice I didn't just make it a V shape through the vertex. All right, I want you to pause the video and I want you to determine the zeros of the following equation using the quadratic formula. This one is actually not factorable. If I multiply a times c, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 4 and add to be negative 4. So that's like negative 2 and 2, negative 4 and 1, positive 4 and negative 1. None of those things are going to add to be negative 4. So this is not factorable, so you must go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Go ahead and do that now. You should have recognized that that's your a, your b, and your c. You should have substituted in, so it's a negative negative 4 plus or minus the square root. B squared should have become 16 plus negative 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. A is not always 1. A negative and a negative make a positive, so this is 4 plus or minus. This came from the b squared, so that's 16. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Oops, I'm sorry, this should be a positive here, because a negative times a negative becomes a positive. So then this becomes 4 plus or minus the square root of 32, all over 4. Well, 32 is not a perfect square, so we're going to put that into our calculator. We're going to do the square root of 32, which rounds to 5.7, not 5.6. So that's 4 plus or minus 5.6 all over 4. Now I have two problems to do. 4 plus 5.6 divided by 4. 4 minus 5.6 divided by 4. That's 2.4. And 4 minus 5.6 divided by 4 is negative 0.4. So we found that our zeros are 2.4 and negative 0.4. All right, now I want you to pause the video and determine the line of symmetry and the vertex of the equation we just did. Remember, your line of symmetry is x equals negative b over 2a. You should have substituted in, that's negative negative 4, all over 2 times 2. That means that becomes a positive 4. 2 times 2 is 4, so our line of symmetry is at x equals 1. That's what we use to substitute in for x to find our vertex. So it's 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 2. 1 squared is 1, 2 times 2 is 2, 4 times 1 is 4, bring down the minus 2. 2 minus 4 is negative 2, negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. So our vertex isn't negative 4, it's 1 comma negative 4. All right, you're going to go ahead and stop the video there and go back to Haiku and find part 2 of our video.